Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Never Alone. So, we are at what I imagine is the third of perhaps 3 acts of the game. And what's funny there is when I unpause the game, the snow seemed a little frame ratey, and that seems weird. I wonder if maybe I am just pushing my graphics card more than I thought I really was. Or there is something weird with it, because this, again, is not really the kind of game that should be that difficult. So we're gonna go with a darker aspect here. At a nighttime, I think we'll probably see more man-made bridges and platforms and get further and further away from the pure white snow. You can see how the snow here is more grayish and bluish. We've got one more of these, or several more of these.
Little Timid and King Island. And in those 3 islands are the stepping stones to get to America.
So King Island is this absolutely beautiful place off the coast of Alaska. And if you can imagine being on this really kind of rocky island that kind of shoots up from the water to these cliffs. And then all of a sudden you see these stilts and then you look up and there are these houses.
They were built on the cliff up high because of the ice. Being an island in the Bering Sea, you have ice that's being pushed by the winds onto the island. So it's going to pile up 50, 60 feet high. Structures are still there today, and people have returned to King Island. It's a growing community as the people return back to their island.
There's quite a lot of old footage being used here, and I wonder if that isn't just because it's probably more public domain, or because they are actively trying to sell a theme and a message here that the King Island that's being shown in this old footage is the King Island that exists now, when I heavily suspect it probably isn't that case. I doubt very many people are still living in those original stilted houses. They very possibly are living in what looks like very modern houses. We do now have certainly the shipping capability to reach almost anywhere in the world, so you could have a manufactured pre-built house built in the middle of mainland United States and then ship all the components to King Island, or you could have it be built in China also and shipped to King Island. There is, compared to Hawaii, less of a chance by far that you could make it a vacation spot and gain enough income via tourism to have it become a thriving location. It's just too cold. Although noticeably a lot of this old footage isn't actually like showing the locations in the winter time. It's showing them fairly empty in snow, or fairly low in snow. Notice that the platform we're standing on here is swaying slightly back and forth. So we're almost getting into like a ghost tale situation now, and this does feel fairly similar to some of the points in Limbo, where Limbo, after a certain level, a certain point, stops feeling like something that could have just been a natural story being told in a natural world and became a much more surreal, supernatural story. And again, I'm heavily questioning if I shouldn't just fall down some of these holes to see if there's a collectible. There's a real danger here that we play the game and I miss just like one or two cultural insights, and then it's gonna want me to play the game a second time, and I'm not gonna be very happy about that idea. Swinging platforms being introduced fairly late in the game. And Nuna being the short name of the female human. Northern Lights being a natural phenomenon can't play a huge role in the culture. Whoops. I just straight up thought I was controlling the other character. Alright, let's just make sure we know who we're controlling this time. So, I guess this is the first time that Nuna is helping the fox reach the other side. And we really have only had a couple of instances in which the fox has helped Nuna reach the other side. But it probably has been about 4 or 5 instances. So I guess what I'm doing is this. Come over here, jump on this, jump on this. Then what does that do? Nothing. So those higher spots didn't matter at all. Northern Lights are interesting, certainly, and it looks like the Northern Lights are going to be personified as spirits in the game. But yeah, they are just a natural phenomenon in the reality, so unlike dealing with bears or hunting or fishing or whaling, I can't attribute them to be that culturally significant on a day-to-day basis and on a practical basis to the First Nation tribe here.
When I was young, my mom, whenever the Northern Lights came out, she just whistle.
Boy, they come alive. Just keep whistling and that aurora will just like, you can almost hear it.
And then she explained to me a little bit later that those are children, and children who've passed away when they were children. You don't want to draw them in too much, is what she said, because then they could play football with your head, play Eskimo football, and that's what they want to do. They're always playing, those children up there.
Don't play out without your hood on. If you don't have your hood on, the Aurora person is going to come down and chop your head off and play ball with your head.
It wasn't like they were trying to do bad, or it was like a scary story or anything like that. It was just, that's how it was. That's what it was.
So some interesting aspects there. This is the first time we've seen any of them say Eskimo. They've been incredibly careful to name their tribe, which I've mostly forgotten. I think it's the Iñupiat tribe, and only use that as a reference. Football, they're saying football, but a round head would probably be closer to an international soccer definition of football than American football. Clearly, This is a ghost story told to children as a way of making sure that they wear their hoods out in the cold so they don't get frostbite. It's obviously, this is the explanation we've made up to justify telling a kid to do something instead of just explaining to the kids that, hey, you'll get frostbite and potentially die. So clearly the Northern Lights are playing a role in their culture, but I think weirdly they're going to play a much bigger role as they become actual spirits in this game. And so if you hadn't watched this cultural insight, then you wouldn't recognize that Nuna is not wearing the hood over her head, which almost certainly is an artistic decision because it would not look as nice had they animated her wearing it on her head. And notice she's not been wearing the hood, and her head never gets any snow on it, and she never really reacts to any of that. So this is effectively just a new way that we can die. So we'll just avoid the hands as we move. You just get grabbed and taken all the way off the screen. They don't bloodily grab your head off. This is another point where you potentially have that plateau of education, in that you have a society that's willing to lie to their children instead of educating their children in the real practical reasons, just because it's easier, just because it is the way they were taught when they were kids. There's a weird lack of diversity here. The game is kind of reminding me I can also drop down here and dodge. There's a lack of diversity of thought when you have smaller cultures with fewer people, and when you don't have any outside forces challenging the way things are done and the way things are said, and that lack of mental or thought mutation, for lack of a better term, lack of diversity of thought, I guess it's about, just stick with that term, allows cultures to stagnate quite a bit and not grow. Now that we're in a world that is completely connected and we have internet and things like that, more and more people can hear opposing points of view and hear different things and learn the real reason. What seems to be lacking here is they probably don't know why the Northern Lights actually exist, and they don't teach their children the real reason that Northern Lights exist, in favor of this myth. And it's not good for people who do know the real reason that the Northern Lights exist, for scientists and just people who have learned the truth, that's been scientifically proven, if that is how you determine truth. It's not good for them to just say, no, this is it, and that completely means you should erase your history. We should still acknowledge that the history and the culture was there, but the reality too needs to be spoken of and worked with and taught. At a certain point, it's the case where you have a science class in the school that teaches science, and then you have a cultural history class that teaches the cultural history of your people, or a fiction class that teaches the fiction. I'm just gonna jump and die over here. Wow, I actually survived that. I'm not even sure if the wolf, like, would the wolf be grabbed? Yes. I mean the fox. Yeah, he's a fox, not a wolf. It's a little surprising it isn't a wolf, actually. Right. So, again, a little lost as to what I'm supposed to be doing. We should actually just see if hitting the northern lights does anything. Nope. I don't know if hitting the backside of the northern lights would do anything either. So you jump over here, and then that lowers that, I guess. So then maybe we go over here to swing on it. This is one of those cases also where you're swinging potentially will be a little floaty. I've never really played a game where the swinging feels 100% natural. There's just something to the rope physics in particular. I just got a another achievement. Like the effects of gravity on a tensioned rope, I think is just harder to calculate than most people would think for games. Month of the night. The month of night.
In the month of November, there's no sun. So during that dark time, we travel by the light of the moon. It's quite different. Everything was silver and black. Toward the horizon, we could see where caribou are because their body heat flowing upward, and we could see it glowing in the moonlight against a dark horizon where there's no stars. If somebody yelled, you could know who yelled from where the sound came from, but specifically where that cloud of their breath went up and it glowed in the moonlight. So that was a good time to travel. It was very surrealistic. And so things that were dark objects look very close, and white objects look very far.
Again, another example where I feel like there should have just been more to that story, and arguably more visuals in that case too, to represent an entire month of just no sun. It's actually quite surprising that there isn't any monsters tales that would be more of a European style tale, in particular vampires. There is a movie where vampires get in Alaska and then they have just no sun that could potentially kill them for a full month, but that movie is relatively recent, in the past few decades, whereas an entire culture and an entire people that year after year is living without sunlight for a full month, you would think that they would have had some kind of tale of a monster or creature, but I guess maybe naturally there aren't actually any natural predators that are new to that November time, so it's just as dangerous as it always was. There are points, at least in Europe I know, where they straight up bring in what are they? Ultraviolet lamps, sun lamps, special sun lamps for people to use and gain sunlight and vitamin D, which when your skin is in the sun, it breaks down vitamin D, and you can be vitamin D deficient if you don't have any sun. Of course, it's also incredibly dangerous to effectively suntan with ultraviolet lights, which is a real shame because at many frequencies of ultraviolet, you can destroy almost all DNA of almost all viruses and bacteria, or at least viruses, maybe not bacteria, and probably not spores and molds, but if ultraviolet wasn't so dangerous to humans at the levels you would need, you would just have ultraviolet lamps or bulbs in your house like you have regular light bulbs to disinfect rooms. They do that for hospitals, but they have to be extremely careful and disinfect the rooms with nobody in it. Takes, I think, somewhere around 5 to 20 minutes, whereas a lot of plastic surfaces are naturally antibacterial. Metal, copper surfaces are naturally antibacterial too after a certain amount of time, so a lot of times you can just wipe off a surface with some simplistic cleaning wipe and wait 2 hours, and then it will be bacteria germ free anyways. If you need that level of cleanliness, which you probably don't. Most people are better off being given small levels of exposure of natural, normal germs to build in immunity to it, to those infections. And in the same way, to get back to this game instead of just rambling, people are often better off with a small level of exposure of sunlight. Too much of a good thing, of course, leads to suntans and cancer. I'm not sure that the fox can push a box. He can't really fall down very easily. Yeah. The fox can't push the box. So all he can do is knock the rope down. Which makes me wonder if I grab this and start climbing. I thought that might just pull the rope. There's a clear point here. I guess we're pulling it back this way instead of pushing it. Maybe the fox can push it then. Nope. This is perhaps a little too much challenge, but I imagine this is the end of this challenge. They are really struggling to have an antagonist to our protagonist other than just the weather. Which, it could have just been the weather. Now, shouldn't everything really just be balanced here? Like, that didn't really make a lot of sense, because that implies that the second crate was heavier than the first crate. Yeah, I do think, though, we're gonna probably end up just running into the bad guy one more time, because we kind of want to see that resolve as a idea. And I question if maybe we aren't going to find some spirit that explains where. Wow. So when it spawns in, it puts you in a very unsafe position. But a fox follows, where Nuna actually doesn't follow. Nope, they both follow. And they're actually subtly screaming as they're being caught, which is getting perhaps a little too horrific. Let's just hope that we can wait for him to pass. There's a lack of characterization of Nuna. She is just a random girl. She's lost her entire tribe, and it would be hard to believe that the tribe would just come back and build a new village and have new teepees and or new huts. So I don't know what happens that would make this a good ending. I imagine the best case scenario here is that we go through this whole journey and then it turns out to all be a dream, just like Alice in Wonderland equivalent. I'm gonna cough for a second, so I'm gonna mute myself. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, I imagine it was all a dream. The village wasn't really destroyed is the best thing here. There's just some like personal growth that would happen with Nuna, and she'd be perhaps more mature as a character, but they really didn't do enough characterization of her to make it feel like she was that childish in the first place. And now she's just fallen down, so I gotta move back down with the box just to be able to see where she is. There's definitely room to have expanded what the narrator says and just mention how Nuna is disobedient and selfish and childish, and how she never listened to the elders, and how she's whining and complaining about the struggle she's on. And since you just don't really have any of that, then it just kind of characterizes her as being disobedient and thus being lucky as the survivor, but then also being unlucky in that the rest of her tribe was destroyed by the bad man. She's more of a victim of circumstances instead of an active participant of her own trials or downfall, or the downfall of her village. And it's fine if you want to characterize a character like that, but when you do, then you make it more difficult for the character to grow, because you haven't given them room to grow. It's too easy to die in a lot of these sequences. And we're now just back to the gimmick of hunkering down. Yeah, normally you would have some kind of like cinematic sequence that would be closer to this, that would be somewhat close to this, if you had like in a Call of Duty game where there's a sandstorm, it would be a cinematic experience of the sandstorm, and you would just see a cutscene. You wouldn't have the player actively having to fight the sandstorm. And a big part of that, I imagine, is because there really isn't just a lot of room for growth. A lot of these cultural insight elements too, I would say, are not doing a really good job with these spirits and symbols. Like, each of these spirits and symbols really should be there. There should be like a flashback to that point. And here comes the bad man, and he is he's taken the snow fox and snapped his neck. And that seems like that's just ended the game and caused her to fall to her death. Which I assume it's just going to reset me, and that isn't the actual ending, because we still have cultural insights to unlock. Although it does make it definitely feel more like we are close to the end. But there's seemingly a fourth act. Press A to continue. So are we going to continue the story forward? I don't know how long snow foxes live, but inevitably I would assume they would only live 20-30 years. And so there's a decent chance they would always die before Nuna, I forget her name. These foreign names and words are not familiar enough to me to stick in my mind. So now we get the first major cutscene in the whole game, and we see her speaking, but they're not doing anything, subtitling it. And looks like our snow fox has now been turned into a humanoid spirit. We get another achievement. So we can control the flying spirit, and yeah, he definitely feels like he's not wearing traditional caribou outfit here. He feels more like he's wearing one of those one-piece pajamas that they sell in Japan with the animal head on it. Or kitty pajamas might just be an easier way to describe it. So the fox can just fly faster. Alright, so what we're going to have to do, I think, is see if there is something. Since we have the flying ability, are we going to hit a wall? I think I got him stuck. I may have to reset the checkpoint. Like, he's stuck in the wall, I think. Like, I'm pushing down and to the right, and I should be able to have a move, but he's totally stuck. So let's just reset from checkpoint. So it feels like there's a limitation on how high the game is going to let you fly, and you're effectively just swimming in the air. So they're reusing that swimming ability. Hold X to interact with spirits. And we have another cultural insight. Let's see this. The problem though is you once again have Nana as a victim of circumstance,
not
losing her
else,
fox friend.
And then man, humans on top, and they're separate from everything. We're taught that everything is equal, and that all the animals have a human form or can be seen in a human form. And so they have just as much or more intelligence. In fact, have a lot to teach people. And so that's how these transformations can happen. It's if the animal wants you to see it in its human form. There's a story where a man comes up to an ice hole, and then realizes there's another man in his parka that's got stuck in the net, and is just stuck like that. Oh, can you let me out? Please help me, And so then he lets the man out, but then realizes that was actually a seal. That was a seal man. And just because that seal wanted that help, that seal allowed itself to be seen in human form.
So I suppose when you have a culture that thinks all animals saying that all animals can be seen in human form, that perhaps creates less of a chance of the monster vampire type characters from being created, because you're coming from this perspective that if a bat could be in human form and be a vampire, it would be considered equal to if a seal or a bear could be in human form. Also explains why you wouldn't see werewolves. Like werewolves too would be a very interesting story if you have an entire month of moonlight, full moon. But yeah, as I was saying before that, you once again have Nana here as a victim of circumstance, losing her, or losing the life of her fox pet.
Kulange hellugo napaqtup nunangat. Derigan nem kinyaktit kay kanutun. Tekpakanaktilangi suli. Ikayuigot ilit kuchich.
Not 100% sure what I'm supposed to be doing here. Seems like we're gonna try and pull it this way. Yeah. So we had the loss, and I kind of wonder if now we're going to just have a somewhat redemptive arc that occurs, and we're just gonna get to like the tops of these trees, which this is the first time we've really started to see trees, which that may not just be really in line with what you should be saying. Seems like I can't interact with this one, so looks like you probably need rings. No, you can interact with it, but he's kind of just waving his hands in different directions. make it interactable. It's possible that the fox couldn't squeeze through smaller areas, but nope, that still can. That's probably good to have that level of consistency. Now that you have this flying character, you've kind of broken the game as you normally would with any flying ability. In that it's too easy now. Too easy to travel and get from point A to point B. Interesting, I tapped the A button and then that instant reset. And arguably maybe it always should instant reset. I saw an owl up there and I hope I'm just gonna come back around. The game is really trying to checkpoint us so we don't end up with a lot of struggle, which I definitely have played games where it doesn't checkpoint you enough and you'll get one jump, do one jump really well, and then the next jump will be too difficult, or the first jump of 3 jumps is too difficult, and so you'll struggle to do the first jump, and then the next 2 are easier. Or even worse, you have like 2 or 3 jumps in a row and all of them are fairly difficult. It does seem like there are different distances that you can drag these tree branches to. In different directions. Move right to this point. Drag that to this point. I still feel like Nuna should have had a knife at some point, a spear at some point. If we're gonna stick with the bolas, it kind of feels like there should almost be a mini game where you're having to hit a lot of things. Like I could see being stuck in one place and having to turn around and hit targets as you're being attacked from several different directions. And a little mini game in that idea. But the default for basically every video game is to have violence in it because that's the easy thing to program, and they're trying to have a minimal amount of violence, which again, maybe that's part of the charter or the grant that probably funded the development of this game, was to have it be more educational and less violent. But for a society that hunts animals, and for a society that is all about hunting, it just feels very, very strange to not be hunting at all in this game. And not building a fire. That would be another skill you would assume plays a much larger role than you would think in their culture, is just knowing how to build a fire and keep a fire going, or how to melt ice and get clean water to drink. I'm not 100% sure where that owl is. I guess the unlocks probably are unlocking in a linear way here, so if I miss one unlock, I'll probably just miss this. But where that owl is, I'm not sure. A lot of games, you would skip over an owl if you missed an owl. Although, I'm not sure this game really wants you to miss any of them. And so it may very well go out of its way. Whoops. You're clearly in a section where the game wants you to control the fox for a big part of that. It seems like you basically have to pull this down to make this appear. But it's not a weird, it's not really a toggle. To grab, like if I hit this, it doesn't toggle and just hold the ground down forever. Okay. Pull this all the way over here. Nope. And you just can't jump because the wind will grab you. And see, I'm having a real problem here remembering which button does which. A jumps, whoops, but B grabs the ground, and then X and Y, well, X does nothing, Y switches characters. No, X does do something actually when you're playing as Fox. So jump here and then grab. It's a little too wonky, and this might be just a great example of why you don't make games that let the wind blow you around, is because you're taking control away from the player. And when you're making a platforming game, last thing you want is for the player to not be in control of their actions. Okay. Is this what I'm supposed to do? Am I supposed to get up and jump to this platform way over here? Yes, I am. And then that gets me a safe checkpoint. And then I can just fall to my death again. And at least we've finally made some progress. See what the next step on this is. There's clearly no homing mechanism in this game, where it would have been appreciated if there was. And I'm still a little concerned that I've missed the owl and that it's somewhere down in this lower left hand side. And I don't know if this game really is going to give me any kind of like chapter selects or anything, so if I do miss one of the cultural insights, that's going to really suck. There isn't enough game here to justify playing it a second time. Here you can see a face in the tree. This whole thing just feels really disconnected from the environments we've been playing in before. And I'm not 100% happy with the idea of going all the way to the top of a tree just to go to the bottom of a tree. Having a flying character scout ahead is a great way to make your game too easy. I think I nearly took fall damage there. So this is another case where I needed the fox to be in the middle. And now I can move the fox over a little bit if it's needed. And here's the owl. So we've made a decent amount of progress here, so let's enjoy this. Now there's 3 more unlocks and we're at an hour point, so I think the safe thing to do here is almost certainly to end the episode after this cultural insight. That way we'll make a new episode, plus we have the whole Foxtails content, which, you know, there's a decent chance the Foxtails content is actually very short and has maybe 4 unlocks and is only maybe an hour long. We'll just have to wait and see.
We have our Dimi, the body, which returns to Nuna, the earth. And we have Atik, who is our name that has been passed down to us over the generations. The spirit of our Atik lives on so long as man remembers that name. It would be hard to describe what happens after death. The feeling is that when our Anik returns to Sila, then that may be reborn if the name is passed on to a new child who can then retain some of the memories of the original name
And so it's not uncommon for grown-ups or adults to meet a child who has the same name maybe as their grandmother and say, "Hi, Akka," which means grandma, "Hi, Appa," or "Hi, little mom," or "Hi, little dad," because it's the traditional belief that the soul, is continuing on.
Humans are renewed and replenished over time, just like our plants. Every year, flowers are born and bloom and they die. Next year, they are born again.
Another too short of a video, really. So they believe in a semi-reincarnation concept. Although it's fair to say, I don't know how fervently any culture really believes in a lot of their customs and beliefs. There's almost certainly people who take it extremely literally, and then there are almost certainly people who take it as being complete bunk, or just take it figuratively, or an interesting idea or good idea. I wouldn't be surprised if there is also a cultural belief of something like karma, in that the actions in one life affect your position or how lucky you'll be in your next life, or even dharma, where your actions in your life, in one life, affects how lucky you are in that one life. Which that's my understanding of karma and dharma. I could be wrong in that interpretation. But yeah, once you start to believe in some level of reincarnation, at a certain level, there might be a genetic memory that gets passed down between humans. We've seen other animals like elephants that seem to have genetic memory, where they remember like boneyards and graveyards that haven't ever been visited by that specific elephant. And even if there isn't genetic memory, there's always cultural memory. So if you take it figuratively, yes, you doing good things will have people remember you and remember your name and pass your name down to your offspring. And yeah, there is sadly not anything too surprising about these cultural insights. It is not that exotic as you might think it is. Would have been. I kind of would have liked to see more of their cultural dishes and their foods. I know Mongolian food is fairly wild and out there, and so there would be room for the Iñupiat people to have some interesting dishes and interesting art and interesting like fabric and weaving and things like that. And we're not seeing a lot of that. And you could definitely see a different version of this game where you find collectibles, unlike the owls, and it would just give you a single static 2D image or photograph of some piece of art that they had made. And then there could have been a lot more collectibles. At that level, maybe you expand the game, and then there's, instead of 24 cultural insights, there's 100 collectibles to collect of varying videos and audio and music, and static images. And then you could more focus on the game and the platforming, which is somewhat short here. The only reason this game has taken even 4 or 5 hours is because we're just constantly getting speed bumped and stopped because of the cultural insights. Had these just been audio logs and you pick them up and you're still doing the platforming while you're listening to the audio log, we would probably have shaved an hour and a half to 2 hours off of this game already. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.